Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Polyhedron Collider cast episode 70. I'm Steve Tudor.
I'm John Cage.
And I'm Andy Lewis.
You will notice we are a man down. Unfortunately, Rory can't make it tonight. I believe he is in a meeting in London, and right this moment will be on a train coming back from London, which, having done that exactly a week ago myself, I hope he's having fun, because I certainly wasn't.
Is he in London discussing our exclusive movie rights?
Wait, we're having a movie?
Let's say yes.
What, to some homeless person in Paddington Station?
Well, who's playing us then?
Well, obviously I'll be played by probably the guy who does Loki. What's his name?
Tom Hiddleston.
Tom Hiddleston, yes, obviously. Or maybe even Benedict Cumberbatch. Someone like that for me. Clearly classy, debonair, handsome.
Really? And Steve?
Steve will have to be played by probably James Corden.
Bastard.
I'm going to regret asking this, but go on, who's playing me?
Peter Dinklage.
I don't know who that is.
I thought you were going to say Tom Cruise then, because Tom Cruise would have to wear platform shoes to get to John's height, surely.
That's true. That's true. I don't want to get sued by Tom Cruise, though.
True. Oh, allegedly.
Allegedly.
Saying that, after hearing all this is years ago, if you go and watch Interview with the Vampire, there's a scene when Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt are like walking through a party. Once you kind of get into your head that Tom Cruise is supposed to be, he's apparently shorter than everyone else, it's immediately obvious that the legs are at the wrong height. So the hips, Tom Cruise's hips are like halfway up Brad Pitt's back. It's pretty obvious that Tom Cruise is walking on a platform through this party.
That's quite funny.
I wonder if I can get a platform.
Anyway, we should move on before we definitely get sued.
So we are a tabletop gaming podcast. Today we are not going to be talking about our normal board games, but we're talking exclusively today about tabletop RPGs, tabletop role-playing games. So, of course, we will be talking quite a bit about Dungeons & Dragons, because that's what we've played the most, but we'll be considering some other games, and we've got some listeners to send in questions on this very topic. So it will be the RPG special, we're calling it.
But first, the news.
I'm not singing it this week. And there we go.
So we are going to Airecon this year. We have our tickets booked. We have our hotel booked. Well, me and John does, at least. So me, John and Andy, I assume, Andy, you're going to be there.
Assuming I don't suffer another incident on the motorway, yes.
True.
Yeah, no running into the back of the car in front, Andy. Come on.
I didn't run. It was more of a crawl, but still.
So Airecon will be on between the 13th and 15th of March 2020. It's going to be at the Harrogate Convention Centre again. As I said, we'll be there. They've also announced a huge raft of special guests. By the way, we're not special guests.
We're just guests.
Weren't we like third tier of guests, in fact?
Yeah. Well, I think we're just part of the furniture now. Well, we've been to every single Airecon apart from the very first one now.
True.
And there's not many people, actually, I can think of that we know of who've been to all of them. I think Luke Hector is the only one who actually was there at the same one as us. I feel like we're part of the furniture now. I think it's just taken us red we're going to be there rather than us being special guests.
Yeah, there are these great people and these awesome people. Oh, and I suppose PHC will be there as well.
I asked Mark if he wants us there, and he said, "I've already booked your press passes, Andy. It's all right." Just assume
Well, that's something.
It is nice. Yes, that's nice.
Yeah.
Can we put in a request this year to, if we're doing a live podcast, to not be in the arse end of nowhere? Because it did take about 3 days to get to that room last time.
And not be on at the same time as the raffle.
Well, everyone loves a good raffle.
Yeah, everyone was like, you coming to see the podcast? Isn't it not the same time as the raffle? I was like, oh.
Wow, awkward.
You could win watching us in the raffle.
Is that the wooden spoon prize? Is it?
It is, yes. That's the dessert wine of prizes.
to be fair, a few people did turn up and watch us, and it was actually a pretty decent experience, I think. People laughed.
I think it went quite well, actually. I thought it was a really good little show we did.
Yeah.
We didn't record it, though.
No.
We left it as exclusive content for Airecon visitors.
That's right. Live and uncut.
Well, I think we repeated most of what we said in the volume podcast anyway, so... So Airecon is a massive gaming convention, I said, up in Harrogate in Yorkshire. It's mainly about gaming. It's basically just rooms upon rooms of open gaming space.
Yeah.
And a fairly decent library for you to go take your pick at, with a little bit of trader area in the centre, and then all kinds of silly events, sensible events and silly events happening. So I think last year we took part in the Family Fortunes game show, which ended up being genuinely hilarious, I thought.
It was good. And I've still got the token prize from that, the Family Fortunes board game itself.
Don't tell Kat, but I think my copy never even made it outside of the convention centre.
Tut.
This is the one where you surprised everybody by knowing a games publisher, John.
Yeah. I was as shocked as everyone else.
Impressive. You've learned something.
Uwe Rosenberg, no less.
Very impressive.
Shall forever be scorched in my brain.
Indeed.
Thank you, Secret Cabal.
Even though you've never played any of his games.
Yet.
I'm not entirely sure you should.
Well, you're very down on me playing large games, but you keep insisting that I should go and play all these games, so make your mind up, Lewis.
I will admit that is a dichotomy, because you should play them because they are good games. But as we established in the last podcast, given that you take notes for something as simple as Sagrada, I don't think you should play a Uwe Rosenberg game because you'd have to write an essay.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
So on the news list, I've got this item, which I didn't write, that says 4 days to go, but there's a problem.
Yes.
What's this relating to?
So in 4 days' time, I'm very excited because I'm picking up my new Tesla. Rah!
That's not board game news, John.
I know. But it's funny.
It's getting good.
Because, well, there's always that risk with anything I say. But, them's the risks. So that bit's exciting. However, because of when this is getting registered, it's going to be a 69 plate.
I see.
And I'm picking it up from Birmingham. And I know a few people on the owners group who've already picked theirs up, which means that the plate, because of where it's being registered, starts with BJ. So my brand new shiny car is going to start with BJ69, and I dread to think what the last three letters are going to read out.
Please tell me it's CUM.
That's my worry. Apparently the DVLA screen these things out, but somehow they've just missed this massive problem.
That's outstanding.
So I might get a private plate after all. It's funny because there's a lot of people who are very angry about this. People have at two ends of the scale. They're either very angry or think it's hilarious. And I'm leaning towards the hilarious because it's better to laugh than cry.
Exactly.
Leaning towards the hilarious. You are the dirtiest mind I know, Mr. Cage.
But that's
You've
my
no doubt
point.
been sniggering about this for the last 6 months.
But that's my point. Like, there's nothing subtle about this anymore. Oh, dear.
Right, genuine tabletop gaming news. We've got
Yes.
lots of Kickstarters have launched these last few days. Several of which are RPGs. We'll go to the RPGs actually later, because then we'll go into our RPG discussion. First one to talk about is a game. You've played the main game, and these are the expansions, Mr. Lewis, I believe, because I think you took delivery of this base game this week.
Right, you must be talking about Everdell.
Based on your playing of the game so far, have you backed the expansions? Was it good enough for you to go, yes, I'm grabbing them?
I backed them before I played it.
Oh, God.
True Lewis style-y.
So yes, I have.
Dear.
Yes, but I have actually now played the game, and I would back it. I would back them anyway. So, for those of you who don't know, Everdell is a fairly straightforward, actually, worker placement game with an engine builder kind of, I'll not say tacked on the side, but kind of mostly under the hood. You are building a small city in Everdell, in the forest, which you can build little buildings, and you can populate them with critters. And there's a kind of a combination of building and associated critter. You don't have to have the critters in there, but it helps if you do. And each card will give you either a resource or an ongoing benefit or something like that when you play them and as you get through the game. You get more workers as you go through, so the game gets more and more complicated the further you get through the game. And it's points to win prizes, and that's pretty much it. So thematically, mechanically, ideologically, it's very straightforward. And but yeah, it's there's a lot of thinking going on. There's a lot of options and a lot of sort of combinations that you can build to build your engine up. So very
ideologically,
yeah, in the sense that is that the right word? In the sense of what you need to do. So the idea of it is literally just you play a worker or you play a card and then you build up your engine. That's it. That's the whole premise of the game. Mm-hmm. But it's nice and simple in terms of your animals. You can play squirrels or rabbits or hedgehogs or whatever, and you just build up a little city in the forest. That's it. Very cutesy pie. Very simple to teach, easy to learn, easy to play. But then you start thinking, and the whole thing sort of slows down massively.
Sounds like my kind of game.
Exactly. I think you will enjoy it. I mean, it's a little gimmicky in the sense you've got this bloody great tree that you build that contains additional workers, a few objectives, and then you put the sort of deck of cards right at the bottom of it. There's no real need for the tree, so you could argue there's a bit of overproduction and gimmick there, but it does look nice. And it isn't difficult to build.
I'd heard that it was actually more difficult to play with the tree, sort of obscuring the cards for some people.
I could see that as a legit criticism, because you put 4 kind of advanced objectives on there, and once you've basically reached the conditions to get it, you put your little meeple on it. But if you're sitting kind of the other side of the table, it would be impossible for you to read those cards. And then, yeah, you're getting into the actual tree to draw the main pack. You just knock the tree and the whole thing sort of falls over. So, yes, legitimate criticism. I suspect the more I play Everdell, the less I would want to use the tree.
Yeah, I could see that.
Okay.
Which brings me to the expansion of Pearlbrook. I haven't played it yet, but I've put all the bits together, and that adds a lot of little sort of cardboard constructions and stuff. Again, probably slightly gimmicky, but it does look very nice. So they have definitely gone for theme over form here.
Okay.
But it is a solid game. I do like it. We both sort of came away from that game thinking, yeah, we enjoyed this. We'd like to play it again. So thumbs up.
Nice.
Okay.
But the 2 expansions on Kickstarter are called Spirecrest and Belfair. So they add more players, because Everdell itself is a 4-player game. So this adds up to 6 players. But you travel off to the Spirecrest Mountains to build more things. And in Belfair, that adds more events, more players, and a few new asymmetric, or at least unique player boards as well. So it basically just makes it... There's more.
Do you think this is one of those occasions where adding 5 and 6 players means that there's a lot of downtime? Or is it still reasonably well balanced?
To be honest, I think it would increase the downtime something fierce. Because the downtime between me and Laura was really quite significant once the game got further on. Because you're looking at different options and different cards. Because you've got Kanda cards, and there's also sort of like open ones that you can play from as well. And trying to work out which ones you want to play and which resources you want to plan for can take a little bit of doing. So with 6 players, the downtime on that will be pretty horrible. So either it'll just be for players who know what they're doing, or they'll need to streamline it a bit, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I found that with Sagrada. It's great with 4 players. When you get to 5 and 6, it really does start to drag a bit.
Oh.
Are there any game where you cannot do something when other people are thinking about their turn?
Mm-hmm.
I think can then leads to adding more players. Just makes the game longer, not necessarily better.
I could see that as a danger.
So that's why I think 3 is the magic number.
Yeah.
I think most games, I think 3 players is the sweet spot.
3 or 4, depends on the game a little bit.
So we've got some other games on the list of Kickstarter, and I've just actually looked up a few others as well. Unfortunately, I don't know as much about these games, because I think Rory had put some details together. Now, he'd pointed on his little Kickstarter highlights on Polyhedron Collider about Godspeed, which is the latest one from Pandasaurus Games, who their last big venture was Dinosaur Island.
Mm-hmm.
We like.
Yeah, and I've got to admit, this looks rather beautiful.
Yeah, I'm tempted by this.
It's a worker placement game where you're kind of colonising the moon, might be the best way to describe it.
Mm-hmm. Racing to colonise it, in fact.
Racing to colonise it, and you're taking on the various nations. Now, it's not just a simple moon race thing. There's obviously silly there's a little bit of silliness to it by the way the graphics have been done, but there's also like you're trying to get alien artifacts which are hidden on the moon. I've only briefly glanced at the gameplay, but it's supposed to be like selling it as an advancement on the worker placement concept. So it's not just a simple case of you have workers. Apparently your workers have influence, which can do things, and you're building projects on the moon and things like that. It looks absolutely beautiful, and the range of pledges is quite interesting, because the base game, which is the deluxe edition, is 57 quid, which isn't too bad. But then the next one above that is like a deluxe all-in, which is like 100 quid. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I'm not sure about this one because of that.
It's pretty much entry level for me these days. That's quite sad.
Yeah.
Entry level for you, Andy, is just what's the maximum pledge I can give?
Pretty much, yeah.
So that looks quite interesting. There's another couple that have turned up since Rory did his update. Ruins of Mars has caught my eye as well. Now, this is like a bit opposite end of the spectrum in regards to the pledge level, because the full game is only $29, which is going to be about 30 quid. And it's bizarre because it looks a little bit similar to Godspeed.
Okay.
So it's another kind of worker placement economic game, but I've not heard of the company who's developed this before. And it's one of those things I need to have a little bit more of a look into it. But the problem is at 30 quid, it's definitely into punt territory.
Yes.
Punt territory is expanding, I've discovered, with you guys.
Well, yeah, punt territory used to be 15 quid, but due to Brexit and inflation, it's now 30 quid.
Yes.
The other one I thought I'd mention, because I am very, very tempted to bag this, is Time of Legends Destinies. Now, this is a joint venture between Lucky Duck Games and Mythic Games.
Oh,
hello.
So, have either of you... Well, I don't think either of you played Chronicles of Crime yet, have you?
No.
No, I've got a copy of this, and I've only played this once. So, Chronicles of Crime is similar to Detective, which we mentioned, almost about a year ago now.
Mm-hmm.
In which it's a crime thriller, and I've got the base game and I've got 2 expansions, so basically I've got 3 different crime campaigns. But what you do is, to gather clues, you use a mobile phone or an iPad, and you have to scan the crime scene, so you have to move your iPad around to look at items.
Ooh.
But you have to play multiplayer, because what you're doing is you're kind of explaining this to other people, and at that time they're like grabbing icons that represent the things you've said. So if you say something like, there's a broken shovel, well, someone's got to try and find, is there a shovel evidence card? Or there's chemical spill on the floor, so someone's looking for the chemicals card. Then you get a certain time limit to look at the crime scene, and you have to scan these cards, and they all give you clues, and then you go interview people, which works a little bit like a choose-your-own-adventure kind of thing, and you've got a certain amount of time with which to do tasks and speak to people. It came across as we talked about Detective quite a bit, like a slicker version of Detective almost. Okay. Not quite as deep as Detective, but subsequently, because it wasn't as deep, it was easier to kind of play through, because Detective was quite open in lots of places. This was a bit narrower. Well, apparently, Destinies is taking some of the aspects of that app-driven game and turning it into like a fantasy adventure game.
Interesting.
So I've got to admit, the description of it is not too dissimilar from Untitled Legends, which we talked about a couple of months back.
Oh, yeah.
But it's been app-driven, so it's a story-driven game with which actions you take in the story on the app change what's happening. And the only reason I've not backed this yet is because I know Oathsworn is around the corner, and I don't think I'm going to be able to afford both.
No. Oh, speaking of which, I noticed Kickstarter's grassed you up for a couple of things, Mr. Tudor, recently.
Well, we'll talk about them actually now, because I think... as I said, this is the RPG episode, and several new RPGs have come up, and you're right. It has grasped me up on a couple of them.
It's about time we actually got to talking about some RPGs in the RPG episode.
But a little bit of peek behind the curtain, we did talk about Everdell 3 times because of audio issues. So what feels like an hour of recording for us is actually about 10 minutes into the podcast. So the first one to mention is the Root RPG.
This looks kind of cool.
Do you remember the Root, the game about little furry animals in the woods? Asynchronous game which broke John's brain.
Yeah. I won it, though. Well, I mean, Alora won it because she was giving me the advice. But I was the one playing the game, so I'm taking that. I won. I beat you guys.
Okay, we'll give you that.
I've got to admit, any interest in this? I mean, it came out of nowhere for me. Bizarrely, I realised I'd actually heard of it, but didn't seem like it should be real. An RPG based on the Root universe.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how it might work, but I don't know if I'd bother backing it, to be honest. I mean, I'm struggling to fit enough time to play D&D at the moment. But I like the Root game, but I wouldn't say at this point, I don't think there's enough of the universe that's been explored to create an RPG. Obviously, that's presumably what the RPG book will do.
I like the idea of it, but I feel like I'd like to see a bit more about it, about the actual content before I committed. But like the whole sort of warfare between all the different woodland animals, I kind of like that idea, and that you'd be, taking up a faction or a character within one of those factions, coming together as a band or something. I could see kind of some interest in there, depending on how they put the mechanics of it together. Yeah, I'd be tempted.
It's not too bad. The digital version, so PDF is quite a reasonable price, to be fair.
Punt territory, as you say.
So yeah, you can get all the digital books for £17, which I think is not a bad price.
That's all right, actually. That's punt territory, as you say.
Yeah. Well, and as we talk about the other games I mentioned, the thing about RPGs I've noticed on Kickstarter is they now do, a lot of them do this PDF pledge level, which all you're doing is getting a digital copy of it. And the prices are such which it is like, oh yeah, do you know what? Sod it, I will take a punt on that.
It's especially tempting when, in all likelihood, we would probably play it online via Roll20.
Yes.
And to be fair, I read all these things on my iPad, and I found it almost feels like you've got the book in front of you with an iPad anyway. Reading them on a computer, if you want to read them on a laptop or a desktop PC, it always feels a little bit weird. But as I read them on the train on my iPad. It just, I can reference them quick, I can bookmark them. Hell, I can even annotate them and put notes on them, knowing that I've not scribbled over a real copy of the rulebook, which is pretty cool. So, speaking of punt territory and me being grassed up, I have indeed backed 2 Kickstarters, which are both RPGs. So, the first one I'll mention is Heart. Adam told me about this one because Adam is a big fan of the game that came before this. So, the designer of Heart released an RPG a little while back called Spire. Now, you kind of have to mention Spire before you mention Heart because the two of them are linked. So Spire is an RPG in which you play Dark Elves, and the whole idea is, if you imagine like in Forgotten Realms, the High Elves have finally had enough and have invaded Menza Branson and basically cuffed all the Dark Elves, all the drow around the ear. And the story basically is that they've done that and they've basically enslaved all the drow. The drow have forgotten all their old gods, and they're in this thing called the Spire, which is, the setting's a bit weird because it's kind of fantasy, kind of sci-fi, kind of cyberpunk. I was going to say, not steampunk, cyberpunk. And you basically play as downtrodden drow in a city being ruled by oppressive high elves. And all the high elves, you don't see their face because they all wear magical masks. And there's like some of the expansion books for that are just books describing what the masks do. So it's this kind of like really dirty, gritty game. Well, the whole thing, the story about the Spire, is the Spire sits above the Heart, which is basically an entrance to the Underdark. And so Heart is about exploring this world's version of the Underdark.
The description and the bit I read online does sound quite cool. And I was about to say, as you say, it's another one that you can back the PDF one, right?
Yeah.
So I was looking at it and I was thinking, maybe I should back this. And I was like, who am I likely to play this with that's already backed it? Oh, yeah.
Well, this is definitely punt territory because bizarrely, you've got 2 tiers for the PDF version. You've got the hardship tier and the standard tier. And the rewards for both tiers are exactly the same. So you can pay £10 for the PDF or you can pay £15 for the PDF.
To support them.
Yeah. So I paid the £15.
Oh, very generous of you.
I thought it'd be nice. And Adam's already. Well, we've already got a copy of the quick start rules as well. So I've actually been flicking through them, and it does sound a bit bonkers. I think bonkers is the way to go. Now, if you buy the book for this as well, it comes with a board, which is I'll explain in another game as well. So it's got a board in which you're going to explore this Heart, and you're going to make changes to the board. Now, in much the same way as a legacy game. So the idea is, as you play, you'll have this board game type board in front of you, which you'll make notes on and put locations on of the places you visit. So you build the map of the world as you play.
Interesting.
Again, we'll be playing. Well, no doubt we'll play that via Roll20, and I can already see how that could quite easily be done, which would be pretty cool.
Yeah, sounds good.
By the way, as well, the artwork, if anyone's ever played Darkest Dungeon, the artwork is very much of that style.
Yeah,
that kind of like
I've seen
inked,
it and not played it.
Yeah, inked comic, almost like cel-shaded style, but like inked cel-shaded, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So the other one I backed is the expansion to Forbidden Lands.
Ooh.
If you were watching our Twitter this week, the publishers, Free League or Freya Ligan, actually gave away the PDFs of the original version of this for free, but it was only available for 1 day. So I bagged this. I was quite sharp, and I retweeted it and put it out so several people could grab it. What this is have you ever heard of a West Marches style game?
No.
I've heard the terminology, but I've no idea what it means.
This is worth explaining because we might touch on this again later. So West Marches is a style of playing, traditionally played Dungeons and Dragons, where instead of there being this big campaign with an overarching story and the same group of people every week, the players kind of push the story, and the players decide who's playing and when they're playing. So in a West Marches style campaign, you may have more players than would normally be in a session. So you might have like 10, 12 players.
Mm-hmm.
And then several of them will get together and say, oh, well, we want to play this Friday. So, okay, who's available Friday? Andy, John, Rory's available Friday. What do we want to do? Well, we've heard this story about this ancient temple out in the wilderness. So we're going to look at that. And the whole idea is you have... It's supposed to be like you're living on the edge of some kind of unexplored wilderness, and the DM will have given you hints about certain things that exist out there.
Mm-hmm.
But the DM is not like giving you plot hooks. He's just giving these dribs and drabs of information, and you decide before the session what you want to do. The adventures themselves are fairly typical kind of adventures. But you could have players at different levels because you've all leveled up differently. I said there's no overarching story. You all communicate between sessions about what you want to do and where you want to go. And the DM doesn't plan like days, weeks in advance. He just gets told, right, we want to have a look at this thing. Right, I'll prep this adventure.
That sounds very similar to our D&D sessions, Steve.
It's very, very different because I said, you guys, it would be, say we had the group we've got now, it might be different people on every single adventure.
Yeah, okay.
And the whole idea is there is no connecting story. It's just, you're just playing. You're just playing this adventure this week kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So do you switch between characters that, like you'd have, say, 3 or 4 characters each or something?
No, you have your own character and you get your XP. You do the traditional XP advancement.
Okay.
So as I said, you could go on a quest and one of is level 5 and someone else is level 2.
Interesting.
And then you need to think about amongst yourselves, well, maybe the level 5s don't go on a quest this week because otherwise, everyone else is going to be lagging behind. And you have a joint pot of money as well you share for buying equipment in between sessions and things like that.
Does it sound like there's a recipe for it to become a bit unbalanced?
It's bizarre, but the rules are definitely there in bog standard 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons for playing unbalanced groups.
Okay.
There's all kind of rules for it. It's just we always happen to play with several people at the same level. Mm-hmm. And this goes back to the old, the older versions of D&D where every single class leveled up at a different rate anyway.
God, yes,
right,
yes.
Okay.
I remember Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, Baldur's Gate, the video game, because it's based on 2nd edition, has exactly that. I've been playing Baldur's Gate again recently. I've got to the point where my thief character now has more hit points than my paladin, even though they've both got the same amount of experience points, because the thief is like 2 levels ahead of the paladin, because the paladin needs so much more experience points to level up.
It's mental, yeah. I've had my druid at like level, is it druid? Yeah, druid or cleric, actually, at like level 30, and the paladin's still poncing along at 24. It's ridiculous.
What Forbidden Lands is like a new game which takes this kind of West Marches approach and basically, rather than, ignores Dungeons and Dragons and makes its own game based on this concept. So if you buy the physical version, you actually have another game which comes with a board. So you get a full-on map of the Forbidden Lands. And what you're basically doing is exploring the Forbidden Lands. The rulebook says, give the players some legends to hear about, some places to explore. And they come back to you as a DM and go, oh, we're going to explore here today. And the physical copy of this comes with, again, stickers. So when people explore, when they find like the Necromancer's Tomb, you put the sticker for the Necromancer's Tomb on there.
Yeah,
when a player
cool.
character dies out in the wilderness, you put a little sticker on that says where they died. So players can go back and find that afterwards.
And get killed there as well.
Yeah, why not? What this Bitter Reach is, which is the expansion, it's a campaign expansion, so it's a little bit more, I wouldn't say interlinked. I'd look at the other expansion they did. It's not kind of interlinked adventures, but more thematically linked adventures. But this Bitter Reach adds like a completely new realm, a completely new area. So it's a new map with new locations you can go to.
Sounds intriguing.
Indeed.
So I thought, what the hell? I'm going to go for a punt for that. And it's all, the artwork is actually quite cool because it's all made to look like an old 80s.
Awesome.
So it's all like pen and ink kind of artwork through it, or pencil and ink. So everything looks kind of old fashioned. I mean, the maps look beautiful. The maps look modern and beautifully drawn. But the artwork in the book, do you know what it really reminds me of? Actually, it reminds me of the artwork in an old 90s fighting fantasy book.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, that's simple black and white artwork. So yeah, I've got the basic version now because I got it when they give it free, and I've got the expansion coming. So do all sorts with it.
Hook, line, and sinker.
So I've pledged about £13 for that because I've just got the digital version of the expansion. I was tempted by the physical version of the books because Adam's got them, and they are absolutely beautiful books. But I try not to spend any money at the moment.
And failing.
So those are the games coming to Kickstarter. So we're not as... It's a bit weird, this, because normally we talk about a board game and then just talk about that and discuss it. But it's a bit weirder talking about RPGs because, well, really our main kind of way of playing RPGs lately has been Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition with a couple of tweaks, tinkers in some other stuff. And one of the things we have mentioned in the past as well, it's worth us explaining, we play via Roll20, which is an online system. So we'd use Roll20, then either Discord or Skype, whichever service is actually working that evening.
Whichever one is behaving least badly.
Yes.
Because it's pretty rare that one of them just goes, yep, I'm going to work tonight.
And I've got to admit, I know you, Andy, managed to play a bit of a physical campaign just before you moved.
Yes.
And I did as well, but I must admit that if Roll20 didn't exist or something similar, because there's other systems are available, if Roll20 didn't exist, I don't think I'd be playing any RPGs at the moment at all.
I would agree with that, actually. Yeah, I'd struggle for time because now we're all separated, saving on an hour of driving time each way. That is a godsend, really.
And I think when you've got, although we take the piss out of it, Skype and Discord and things like that, they do enable these things, because you can see the video and you can hear people. Okay, internet connections aren't always great and the service sometimes goes down or plays up, but being able to see and talk to one another directly, kind of like around a table, does make the difference. I think Adam said he used to play at least one RPG via Discord chat, which sounds bonkers to me. I don't think I could do that. But when you've got the video up there and you can all see a collective view via Roll20 of what the characters are seeing, I think that works really well.
No, I think you're right. It takes a little bit of getting used to, because even when we started recording this podcast as well, we suffered the same problem that you don't want to start talking over each other. So you've got to be disciplined enough that if somebody starts talking, you've got to shut up.
Yeah.
And when you start playing D&D, because everyone wants to talk to the dungeon master, and the DM's like, whoa, one at a time.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things that I was conscious of when we first started. 'Cause in the first session, we had 5 or 6 players and the DM. And
it was
I
more,
made the decision. Was it more? I
Didn't we have
had
everyone
6.
in one?
No, because a couple of people joined after the first session. I'm sure of it.
Maybe you're right.
I know Derek definitely did. So maybe we had 7 players at one point. I don't know, but I made the decision quite early on that it needs to be less people because of that very reason, because everyone wants to talk to the DM at the same time. So we've been running with 4 players and 1 DM.
Yeah.
I think that seems a reasonable, well balanced. I don't think 5 would work as well.
No, I agree. I think 4's the maximum.
I ran with 5. I had 5 in the Tyranny of Dragons saga I ran. Not to start with, at least I don't think it was, but it certainly finished that way. And it was okay. I wouldn't like to go any more than 5. Online, certainly.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think you end up with a bit too much downtime otherwise.
Yeah, especially in combat. My God.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's worth actually putting that as a little bit of a caveat when we're talking about our games, that we have been experiencing these games through Roll20 with a little bit of real tabletop on the side.
Mm.
And whether that actually influences our thoughts about any games, I don't know. But I think it's worth mentioning later on, because I think it's one of the questions where I think it was our current method of playing does affect this a little bit.
Okay.
The whole playing online versus playing first hand definitely is a big thing to some people. Like, I think for us, it's not a huge problem. Don't get me wrong, I would rather play face to face. I think it is more involving.
I think we all would, yeah. It's fair.
And I love rolling dice, so.
Yeah. I've got a load of metal dice that sit unused now. It sucks.
Yeah, it's almost like as if I've partitioned that like time now, though. So if I can meet up and play a game, it's going to be a board game.
Mm.
Whereas if I can't meet up and play a game, it's going to be an RPG. Yeah, because do it online.
I have to admit, though, Roll20 does take some getting used to as well, like playing online. But once you are used to it and you get an understanding of how it works and what its foibles are, and once you've tweaked it to the point where it suits everybody, it is actually quite smooth.
It requires, I think, though, someone to have set up the templates well.
Yes.
Because one of the things I noticed is the Dungeons and Dragons template is very good because, of course, it's probably the most used template in Roll20. But it's also a little bit open-ended, that is, because D&D can be played in so many different ways.
Mm.
Whereas we played Blades in the Dark earlier this week on Roll20, and that template was beautiful. Someone had put so much effort into that, making all the character sheets look exactly like the paper character sheets. And then when you rolled the dice, it even had little gifs of little flames in the dark, which I thought were absolutely beautiful.
That's lovely.
Which somebody's just put, and then that's somebody taking that effort of their own time. That's not somebody in Roll20 making those things.
Speaking of someone who obsessively put together the stream that we do, I can absolutely see the appeal of doing that. Like, there's something really, really satisfying about putting that sort of thing together and then playing with it and seeing it all work properly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I've just learned about Roll20 splash screens, which are like the first screen the players go to when you load up Roll20 for them, and the sheet you keep their tokens on, so the master token is on. I stumbled across like lots of images of people making these awesome flash screens that had like counters on them, like their treasure and quests and things like that, and I'm like, oh my god.
Right, when I start my next adventure, I am totally skanking that idea.
Yoink.
Yeah.
It's such a cool idea.
Yes, no, it is. Especially tokens, because as we've discovered, that if you don't set them up right, they can vary depending on what you do during the game, and it's a real pain in the ass to try and sort of retcon and correct that without massively changing things.
Yeah.
So
especially when someone makes a change to a token thinking it's their token, and as soon as you finish that map, that token gets deleted.
Yes.
So you haven't actually changed the master one that's being used in the next game.
No, that's it, exactly, yes. Oh, well. You do that with the monsters. Yeah, you do. I've done that with the monsters. You just sort of stop duplicating them all. But of course, if you don't change the master, they all retain. Yes. And basically, you've got to unlink their hit points, because otherwise, you change the hit points on one, and all of them change. But
it's not without its foibles, and I think it's more difficult for the DM versus the players.
It very much is, yes.
It is, but it requires prep time. But then again, every game with every RPG, well, not every RPG, most RPGs require prep time. And if a dungeon master is not loading maps into Roll20 and setting up tokens, they're making little maps to put in front of their players in paper and making cutout cardboard, or even making full like 40k style models of the terrain, which I've seen, which is just bonkers.
That's just too much.
That's keen, that is.
Yes, that is keen. So let's actually talk about some of the games we've been playing. So obviously we'll talk about Dungeons and Dragons. So I think we'll start with a little bit of like a mini review of Tyranny of Dragons, because you've just recently finished running that campaign, haven't you, Andy?
Yes.
And it is appropriately timed because the special edition is about to be re-released.
Yes, I saw that. Apparently it has been tweaked very slightly, apparently rebalanced, and they've changed a few bits and bobs about it. Now, I don't know what they've changed and what they've done with it, but I could make some suggestions as to what they should change and improve, having gone through the entirety of that campaign. Now, the Tyranny of Dragons campaign itself is actually made of 2 books. So this is the very first adventure that Wizards of the Coast wrote for 5th edition. So it is... You can tell it's the first one because it's a little rough around the edges in places. But it's essentially made up of 2 books, one of which is called The Horde of the Dragon Queen, which is the first part, and then the second part is The Rise of Tiamat. Mm-hmm. Guess what that's about. And the whole campaign is about the cult of the dragon, trying to raise Tiamat from Avernus in the 9 Hells, and of course the adventurers are trying to thwart the cult's plans, in a nutshell. And it's set over massive campaign, actually. It's 1st to 15th level, or 14th, I think is what you guys got to. I didn't want to make it too easy.
You didn't.
No. This campaign got off to a fairly shaky start, actually, because I started it actually with you two and your respective wives, if I remember rightly. So you guys all started it about 2, maybe 3 years ago now.
Is it really that long?
Yeah.
It's got to be 3 because I've been in Chipping Camden at least 2.
Yeah, because you were still in Malvern when we started, and it kind of, we got, I think, to chapter 2. You wandered into a cave, Steve, and I murdered you.
Yes.
You threw your toys out the pram, and I think that was the last session we played. But not because you threw the toys out the pram, just because I think you moved house shortly afterwards, and I think it just died a death, basically. But this was playing face-to-face on a table. So Roll20 has obviously helped in that aspect. So I was still determined to play this campaign, so I rebooted it sometime later with a few people from the Worcester Board Gaming Group. And we played... It must have been about 2/3 of the first book, and a couple of people had to leave, or actually, no, I moved house, in fact. Mm-hmm. So I then sort of turned around and said, well, guys, you know, I'm moving to Bewdley. Some people are still in Malvern, some are in Worcester. Everyone's sort of scattered all over the place. I'm going to move to Roll20.
Well, before that, didn't Scott have to leave because he just couldn't commit the time anymore?
Yes.
So I joined in his place.
That's right, yes. I knew you joined. You joined.
Yeah, and then a little later, you because you moved and it was just going to be easier, we started looking at moving to Roll20.
And then because of that, we had a couple of people leave as well. I still don't fully understand the logic behind their leaving, but it was their decision, so I can leave it at that. And then we got a couple more people in to fill those gaps, and I think those people stayed till the end. So a number of shift changes through the campaign, but I think only one person actually managed to stay in start to finish, and that was Paul, the paladin. So he's the only one who managed to stay in all the way through. But I think you managed to play through about 2/3 of the whole thing, John. But in terms of the actual story itself, obviously we've now got the benefit of you being a player, and obviously me being the DM.
Boy.
So yeah. It'll be interesting to see how you felt it was.
I enjoyed it. I think there were times where it felt obviously like it was quite on rails compared to the Storm King's Thunder game I played with Steve. But for the most part, it was, it felt like there was enough decisions that we're making. Just didn't often. I was going to say, it often felt like we couldn't go and do other things, but actually my character that I played, one of his flaws is that he was particularly determined, and once he got something in his head, he would just want to go and do that thing. And there were probably 3 or 4 occasions where you put something that was almost certainly a side quest down before us. My character persuaded the rest of the party that, no, we've got this one job, this one thing, we've got to stop the rise of Tiamat. That's it. That's the thing we're doing. And everyone else was like, but we might go and kill a thing or do some good. Or my character's like, no, I'm walking off now.
Yes, I put down a nice, juicy, high-level crypt for you all to explore, which was basically me playtesting an adventure I'm writing, and you ignored it, you bastards.
Yep.
Now, I would say, I mean, I've not played, apart from like the first couple of sessions, I've not played much Tyranny of Dragons, and the railroadiness has been a common complaint. Mm-hmm. And I would also say that you make reference to Storm King's Thunder. I feel as if Storm King's Thunder was almost a response to that criticism. It's almost like as if because two adventure books came out between them, which was Princes of the Apocalypse and Curse of Strahd, and I feel as if the Princess and Strahd were actually in development at the same time as Tyranny of Dragons, because it really does feel like Storm King's Thunder was an answer to the criticisms of Tyranny of Dragons, as if they started developing that after they start to get the feedback from customers.
Yeah, I think I can believe that. I don't know, but I think Curse of Strahd must have been quite early, and as you say, ongoing, because I think it's a redo and a kind of a rehash of Ravenholm, isn't not Ravenholm.
Almost every single campaign book that Wizards of the Coast have released for 5th edition is a redo. Tyranny of Dragons, I actually think, is the only original one, because Prince of the Apocalypse is a redo of the Temple of Elemental Evil.
Yes.
Curse of Strahd is a redo of Castle Strahd from Ravenloft.
That's it.
Yep. Storm King's Thunder is a redo of Against the Giants, which is like a really old Gary Gygax adventure from like the late 70s.
Oh, wow.
Tomb of Annihilation is a remake of Tomb of Horrors. Again, another classic Gygax. Ghosts of Saltmarsh is quite literally a reprint of Ghosts of Saltmarsh. It's not even. It's exactly the same adventure. It's only, I think, like Dungeon of the Mad Mage is a remake of all the old Beneath Undermountain adventures. I think the only really original does is Waterdeep Dragon Heist is original, and the one you've just waved in front of me, which is Descent into Avernus, is not a remake. It feels. I think that's a completely original adventure.
But so Tyranny is. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how John thinks of this, because he's, as the player, he will have obviously seen a very different side of it to me as the DM. As the DM, I mean, you say it was on rails even. Put the teeth in.
What do I say?
I as the DM, I agree in a way. It was very difficult at times to almost come up with stuff around where you were to actually make it slightly interesting. I mean, the worst case of this was kind of about halfway through Horde of the Dragon Queen, so halfway through the first half. Chapter 4, where basically the entire party is on a 3-month caravan ride, basically, to go from Baldur's Gate to Waterdeep and all the way up to Neverwinter. And it was awful. It was awful for the players, and it was awful for the DM, because there are a number of encounters all the way through it, and you kind of fast track it in a way. But it meant that all the encounters, because they were so sporadic to keep it sensible within the timeline, it meant all the encounters were done with the characters being full strength, and it made them almost farcical, because you either have the caravan completely mobbed every time, which just seems a bit too convenient, or it just makes the encounters a walkover. So there were a few, and even then it requires the party to actually get off the caravans and go exploring, which they very rarely did. Much to my consternation, I'd set up about 3 or 4 side quests for them to do, and they never bloody did it.
They're so sick of the caravan by that point, they just wanted to finish it.
It's fair enough. Now, the thing is, I mean, as the DM, I think with the benefit of hindsight, I could have, and probably should have, massively fast-track it, and just given you a couple of, or one kind of major side quest to do, which would have taken, 1 or 2 sessions, got you back into the caravan, and then got to your destination, which would probably have been a bit more interesting. But it would have then detracted from the point of you guarding the caravan, which is why you were hired. So it just seemed a little weird. But I mean, if they were going to change for this new updated edition, if they were going to streamline any of it, that would be the bit to completely change, in my opinion, because it was tedious to DM, it was tedious to play, and I don't really think it added that much to the story either.
Can't really comment because I joined literally as they just finished that, and everyone was still whining about it bitterly.
That's right, yes, because you joined because essentially the caravan's supposed to go further north. I don't know how much spoiler I can put in this. I think it's probably fair to say some of this is going to be spoiled. So if you are ever going to play Tyranny of Dragons, then skip on. I'll try and not spoil too much of it because a lot of it is quite important. But in this particular case, basically John joined at the end of this caravan ride in a castle, basically in the middle of nowhere in a marsh. The party had essentially just escaped from a kind of a stopover, basically, because they discovered something fishy was going on. And they ran into John's character. How convenient that the DM managed to put you down there.
Indeed.
And they went from there. The one of the biggest complaints I have as the DM for Tyranny of Dragons is the pacing of it was all over the place. It was really strange because you have these horrible drawn out bits like this caravan ride, which lasted just forever. But then later in the game, there was one chapter much later on in Rise of Tiamat, almost before the final battle actually, where you ended up going to Thay.
Yeah, that felt very disconnected.
It was.
We want to do this bit. Okay, we'll go over there and this stuff will happen and then we're back. Okay, yeah. Did that affect anything? Didn't seem to. What was that about? Was that the same adventure?
It was extremely weird. It was very badly written.
It almost felt like it was like scene setting for like another campaign that would happen afterwards.
Yes. I didn't want to get into Storm King's Thunder yet, but my biggest criticism... Well, I've got two big criticisms of Storm King's Thunder, and my main one is it's like a bloody tourist's guide to Faerun. It keeps dropping in all these links to loads of other adventures. It basically quite literally drops in nods to other things that are happening in the Sword Coast. So it directly references an NPC from Rise of Tiamat, from Horde of the Dragon Queen.
Oh, really?
Not only does it directly reference that character, it actually gives the players a quest to go kill him.
Yeah.
Which I've given to the team, the players who are playing that, and they are going to do it. Now, I'm going to have to completely rewrite that because that book actually says, go buy Horde of the Dragon Queen and run the chapter from Horde of the Dragon Queen where this character is.
Which chapter? Which character?
It's this cloud giant, Plagoth.
Oh!
Yeah.
The book quite literally says, go see this character. And actually says, go buy another book just to run this side quest.
That's a hell of a sales pitch.
By the way, if you've run this book as written, you have just given the players this quest. Now, of course, you as a DM can write whatever you want, but it name checks this particular character, so therefore links it to, Tyranny of Dragons.
That's really stupid.
Well, I haven't finished yet.
Okay.
There are numerous references to the elemental cults from Princes of the Apocalypse, where if you've not played Princes of the Apocalypse would just seem random. In fact, I changed one of them, but I put one of them in, and you guys even went, oh God, another cult. There's two massive links to Tomb of Annihilation, one of which is a quest lead, which leads nowhere because the book hadn't come out yet. So the book actually says, your players may be tempted to follow this lead, but they can't because you can't buy the book yet.
What?
Brilliant.
And there's another thing where there's a bunch of NPCs turn up and it's like right at the very end, and you're like a certain type of monster. It's like, why the hell are these in here? And I even went onto a forum and said, why are these monsters in here? And everyone went, oh, that's a link to Tomb of Annihilation.
No. That's rubbish. That's really stupid having Blagoth in there, because Storm King's Thunder is set after Tyranny of Dragons.
Yes.
I mean, we've chosen to, but it is anyway.
If you play it canonical, then Tyranny of Dragons is the cause of Storm King's Thunder, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I can believe that. So basically, the giants essentially take advantage of the events of Tyranny of Dragons. But that means that to go and encounter Blagothkus in Storm King's Thunder, they have to go back in time, because one of the things that Blagothkus does directly influences something the party does in Tyranny of Dragons.
Exactly. It's very, very weird. If the party's already played Tyranny of Dragons, then you'd obviously have to change it. But if you were playing it exactly on book, then there are issues.
Yes, there are. That's really weird. Oh well,
it is very weird. I mean, I've changed that bit. I've kept the quest in, but I've changed. I mean, I've taken cues from your campaign, because I knew several players would be playing this campaign after your campaign.
Yeah.
I've taken things that have happened in your campaign and used it to kind of scene set in mind. So.
Yes, no, I remember the discussions. He said, "Have you done this yet, Andy?" Yes. What happened? Oh, they all died. I might do this. Okay, let me know. And it makes sense to do that, because to try and keep the canon between our two games, I think, is definitely better for the players. Or at least I'd like to think it was better for the players.
Definitely. For those of us that are sharing the two campaigns, the little nods are really cool, I think.
Oh, that's good to know. But coming back to the Thavian mission, John, you're right. I mean, it would have felt really strange for the players, because it was weird for me, because you guys basically double leveled in a single session. Now,
yeah,
I didn't want to do that, but the story didn't really give me any choice. I could have triple leveled you, which would have made even less sense. I was never going to do that.
What?
Oh yeah.
I always question it when someone says, and I've only DM'd a very tiny amount, but when someone says there's nothing I can do, kind of think, well, you are the DM. You could change whatever you like.
It's true. But the way the book's written, essentially, there were a number of encounters that you guys had with the cult that got stronger and stronger and stronger, basically when you got murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of each one of those, you were supposed to level up. Now, at the end of the third one, when you all died, I didn't level you, for obvious reasons. So the book's kind of expecting you to be at a certain level when you go into certain chapters. But it gave me the option at the end of I think it was the Thavian mission, actually, to level you, because when you go into the final battle, you really need to be at a specific, at least a certain level to take on whatever's there. Otherwise, you're just going to get your arse kicked, like properly kicked.
Even more so.
Even more so. So I thought, well, the only way I can do this is by sticking to the leveling structure of the book, is basically double level you. You got through the Thavian mission in like 3/4 of a session. So because you leveled up at the start of, or the end of the last session, basically, because you did whatever you were supposed to do. I can't remember what it was. And you did it successfully. Oh, it was the escape from the Tower of Zonthal, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. But then you did the Thavian mission really quickly. And it's really, really short in the book as well. It's not as if it's a particularly long chapter. You go there, you talk to the vampire queen, and then you have a bit of a bad dream, and then you leave. And that's it, basically. So there's not really much I could do time-wise there, unless I gave you an extended mission in Thay. But there's no bloody way I was going to do that, because A, it has absolutely no canon and no connection to the ongoing story.
Mm-hmm.
Making a mission in Thay, none of you had really the magic or the experience or the knowledge, and I certainly bloody didn't, to build a mission in Thay, because it's just all magic and undead. And it would have felt a little jarring more than it already did. So I thought, well, I'm just going to have to sort of bite the bullet and either level you beforehand or level you afterwards. One way or the other, you're going to get 2 levels in a very short space of time. And even if I hadn't have leveled you at the start, you'd have leveled anyway. So it just felt a bit weird.
It's the kind of, to give kind of a bit of explanation, John, it's, yeah, everything's within your control. It's just, especially if you're going to do like a big book, like the classic Wizards of the Coast 5th edition books, you realise that changing something now may have repercussions that you don't realise later on down the line.
Oh yeah, I could totally see that would happen. But yeah, I just think, I agree, it's not easy to do, but I always think it's a bit of a cop-out to say there's nothing I could do, that's how it's written. You're like, well...
That's down to style, though, as well, because we are I think we're in an enlightened age of role-playing games. And I think that's one of the things why I think there's such a sudden burst of it at the moment. But it used to be the case of, like, you will play by this book. You will do what the book says, kind of thing. To the point where I've know of role-playing games where there's no decisions at the beginning of the game because it just says, right, you decided to do this, you decided to do this, and now you're here in the middle of this adventure, kind of thing.
Okay.
And that was the way it used to be played, almost.
Mm-hmm.
It's and I think some of the larger books fall foul of that a little bit because it expects players to do certain things. It's always going to happen in a pre-written adventure where it's going to at one point expect the players to have done something, and you as the DM go, "Well, it didn't bloody do that, did they?"
Oh, don't start me. Honestly, the Tyranny of Dragons is like that. It's really, it's weirdly written. It's not necessarily badly written. It just seems to assume that the train of logic of the adventurers is not
logical.
No, not even that. That's the strange thing. A lot of what you guys did, most of the time, made some kind of sense of the situation you were in. Mm-hmm. But some of the comments that are in the book, I mean, I'll show you at some point, John, because now you've finished it, it's obviously not going to spoil anything. That it kind of says, if the adventurers do this, and it's something completely bizarre, like, pull a book on a bookshelf that you haven't even mentioned, or if they decide to investigate the spookiness and they decide to do some kind of alchemy test on the chemical bench, when none of them have the skills, none of them probably have any interest in it, and then the thing it produces is some kind of, you are immune to wood nymphs or something for an hour. You're like, who cares? It doesn't matter. It's something it's stuff like that that's written into the text, and you think, why would anyone do that?
That is quite strange. I guess it depends on the makeup of the party, though. If you've got a bunch of tinkerers or whatever, or maybe whoever wrote the adventure, that was their thing, like they particularly liked a certain class of character, and they wanted to get some options in there for the sorts of things that they always do on their adventures.
I suppose so, but they were just seemingly...
Sound random.
It was very, very odd, and it kind of assumes that your party will do certain things. And sometimes you did, but most of the time you didn't, because it is an RPG and you guys can do whatever you want. Now, obviously, that's where the skill of the DM comes in to try and adjust and kind of herd you down roughly round the right path. But it's the assumption that the party will do certain things that I found a bit weird. Rather than just saying, right, this is the room and this is what's in it, which a lot of the time, to be fair, it did. Mm-hmm. A lot of the time, it didn't either. Like the one that stuck out in my mind a lot, actually, there was a lot of places where there wasn't quite enough information in there. Like, it would set the scene, which was great. You got a lot of flexibility about how you do that, and you use your imagination, describe to the party, and away you go. Fine, great, that's how it's supposed to go. But then there were certain key bits of information that was sadly lacking. That, like, for example, when you did Zonthal's Tower, you remember that maze?
Yes. Apparently that was a bit like a small version of the caravan trail. You go north from this thing, it curves around a bit. The tower's over there in the distance. There are hedges around you. Okay, we go down this one. Okay, this looks a bit like one of the ones that you went to before, but there's a different challenge in the middle that you may or may not want to do.
It was, the whole idea was it was supposed to be disorienting, and that came across. But when you complete each of these little scenarios, you're supposed to get a little gem, and you did. Mm-hmm. And the gems weren't allowed to be taken out of the maze, much to Derek's disappointment of being the rogue.
Yep.
He's like, oh, yes, we've got a bag full of these gems. And each gem basically was essentially a pass stone to say that, yes, you've completed the challenge, it's never going to happen again, it's never going to be a problem. And there were only a certain number of these things that you could do, so eventually once you've done them all, it's just a case of finding your way through. But it never actually, and you could always leave the maze. Whenever you wanted to, you could, and you almost did a few times, go back to the village that you started from. So you just thought about leaving, the exit sundial would appear, and off you went. But what it never said was what happened to those gems. And if they did disappear, does it mean that you have to do all the puzzles again? Do you keep them? Do they just only disappear when you succeed? It was just little bits like that. It sounds like really small, minor bits of information, but they have massive consequences, and it just wasn't mentioned.
Yeah.
Thankfully, you didn't, so it wasn't that much of a problem, but I could see certain cases when you give the players the option to do something, the book really does need to say, right, these are the consequences of doing this, or don't forget that, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Or give some background on the mechanisms that are at play there.
Exactly. And, Tyranny of Dragons was overly detailed in some places and just not detailed enough in others. It was really weird the way it was written. Rise of Tiamat was definitely better than Horde of the Dragon Queen in terms of the way it was written.
Would you recommend it, though, is the thing?
I really enjoyed it. As a player, I really enjoyed that campaign. It was fun.
Good.
Okay.
Here's a question, actually, that I would not appreciate as the DM. I will answer your question in a minute, Steve. All the way through that campaign, or at least for the second half of it, you guys were trying to build support through various factions of the Lord's Alliance and various other factions around the Sword Coast, the Elves, the Dwarves, the Lord's Alliance, the Underdark, etc., 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 even the Wizards of Thay. There was a reason for all of that. Did that reason ever become apparent to you as a player?
What, you mean why we were trying to build support?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, at the end, they were basically forming an enormous army to keep things busy while we went and put the ring in the volcano.
It was basically end of Lord of the Rings. Yeah, it really was. It was quite scarily like that, actually. Okay, so ultimately it did make sense.
It made sense at the end because that's what happened, but it didn't feel like that's what we were doing throughout the campaign. It felt more like we were desperately trying to stop the cult for the most part.
Okay.
We were doing everything that we could to prevent the rise of Tiamat. It wasn't clear that we were building up support until kind of right at the end. That bit wasn't like an obvious, this is the motivation for you guys doing it, or here's an obvious thing that you will need to do to succeed at this stuff. It's just, we bumbled from this bit to that bit and we screwed up those things, so we've got to go and do this bit now to prevent that next step, which we're going to screw up as well. And then...
Okay. Interesting, because you were supposed to be doing it was supposed to be a bit of both. I mean, it's possible I didn't do my job as a DM very well, but I felt... having read around on the internet, it is a common criticism of it that the use of the allies wasn't really that apparent throughout the campaign, as you say, until the very end. So there wasn't really this overarching feeling that you were building support, that these factions were actually improving your life, which... maybe I could have or should have, as the DM, impressed upon you. But the thing is, you never really directly interacted with him, so it was very difficult to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You ended up, helping the elves. Therefore, the person who represented the elves was on your side. Ergo, he was more likely to give support. Basically, what happened in the background was I had a little tick sheet and a little score chart that gave you points according to the outcomes of some of these missions. And if you got a certain number of points, that person would then support you.
Is that a common sort of mechanism in other books, Steve? Like you have a tick sheet of stuff that, without giving too much away, obviously, because we're still through some of those adventures.
Yeah, well, and we will no doubt play some of them in the future. I flicked through most of the campaign books for the Wizards of the Coast 5th edition campaign books. I would say every single book does something different. And it almost seems on purpose because every book has something in there that's useful in most campaigns.
Gotcha.
So the idea of the tick sheet in Tyranny of Dragons is useful if you're going to do that kind of campaign. Out of the Abyss includes a whole thing on how to run games in the Underdark. And it includes a whole bunch of rules that are really useful for exploring the Underdark, even if you're not running out of the Abyss. Curse of Strahd does a really cool thing with like a tarot deck at the beginning. Tomb of Annihilation introduces the Hex Crawl, which is, although a very old concept, gives you 5th edition rules for it. So they've all got these little things which set them apart and do this other little cool idea. And that idea changes from book to book, basically.
Interesting.
I don't know. As the DM, I don't think it worked that well in Tyranny of Dragons. I mean, from my point of view, it made perfect sense. Because you guys had a number of factions on your side, and then they were going to go towards the end in the big fight. They would provide enough firepower to give you guys a fighting chance to get into the caldera. But because it made sense to me, because I knew the full story. I knew why this was happening. I knew all of the background, and I knew what was going on. Whereas I could probably see that you lot were like, well, why the hell are we doing this? Why do we want to do this? Who cares?
And that is a big problem with DMing a big pre-written campaign anyway. Is trying to make sure your players have got the level of information to understand what the bigger picture is and what they're trying to do and why they're trying to do it.
And that they can actually remember it session to session.
That's the biggest problem, yes.
That's true, yes.
I mean, I take pretty detailed notes in all the games that I play, and in a lot of them I find at the beginning of the session I find myself recounting the stuff that we did recently or looking back at things. But even I screw up and I'm like, it's buried somewhere in OneNote about 15 scrolls up. I really can't be asked to look up the name of that person or, what the specifics of that encounter was. It's 6 months ago now, and a lot's happened in that time.
I would actually say that's a criticism of the current style of playing Dungeons and Dragons. Wizards of Coast have definitely pinned their colours that they're doing big campaign books. Every single adventure book, with the possible exception of Tales of the Yawning Portal, have all been a big campaign that will take you through 10 levels. A big overarching story, a big thick book with a big event, a big world-shattering event that you're going to go from beginning to end and cover. And I think doing these pre-written stories, it's easy as you, the DM, to see this big story and go, yeah, it's all going to work out. Everyone will know what's going on. But when you look at the players, they're all going, hey, what?
Who are you guys again?
What are we doing? Especially if you, from what I hear, most of the DMs, allowing players to do things they want to do can often mean that they can lose track of what these big things are. And sometimes it's your responsibility as a DM to add another hint or another clue that this big thing is coming. And, this is the route they should be going, kind of thing.
I think that's the secret, to have either like an NPC that's sat with them that's occasionally like giving them clues that push things in the right direction, or, some agent that they're working with that drops them tidbits of information every so often, something like that helps remind the party, but not in a way that it's really obvious that you're going to go here next and then you're going to go to there next. And I think that's so for me personally as a player, when I really, really enjoy campaigns, it's when the campaign feels like I know, broadly speaking, the direction that I've got to go. So it's not just like we could do anything and I genuinely have no clue what I should even be doing. Somewhere between there and you're on rails and you will do this and do this and do this. If there are rails there but you can't see them, that's when you've got it perfect.
Yes.
So you've got some idea of the rough direction, you know what your character should be doing, but it's maybe not, it's not obvious that, oh well, we can just go and do that particular thing.
Now I found that the dungeons, the actual dungeons or towers or whatever, the actual physical structures that you lot explored throughout Tyranny of Dragons, I thought they were probably the best bits of the whole campaign. So you had the castle that you explored, the one near when you joined.
Yeah.
Because you had, you were within the confines of that castle, but you had fairly free range as to how you wanted to
screw
explore
it up this time.
Yeah, pretty much. But you could explore it at your own pace. You could go wherever you wanted to go within the confines of that castle. I felt the dungeon in the mountains where you try to find one of the masks, and you basically you nearly got hypnotized by one of those statues.
I tried really quite hard, my character did, to actually get hypnotized, thinking it was a way to get further into the dungeon rather than run to his death.
Yes. And again, I thought that was mostly, there's a couple of sticking points I had with it, quite well written. And then Zonthal's Tower, much, much later, I thought that was probably one of the highlights of the whole campaign, because it was difficult, but not too difficult. The stakes were always pretty high. You guys were never particularly comfortable.
No, that's true.
And you always had to think quite carefully about what you wanted to do next. And I think I got it right in terms of what I threw at you, but also the fact that you could explore, but you were never really sure of where you were going or what you were doing, which I felt was just about right. But a lot of the stuff outside of those sort of confined areas were much less, I suppose by definition, well-defined. But in terms of almost to the point where it's like, well, do you really need to do this? it almost felt a bit too loose. It needed a little bit more tightening down. But one of the issues I had with that lizard temple was that there was the one bit, you remember you went over the slippy bridge and one of you nearly fell in?
Yes.
Yeah. That was so, I'm not going to say badly written, but it was one of these, you will do it this way moments that Steve just mentioned, that, if one of the characters goes anywhere near it, they will slip and fall. You have to roll a dex roll. No matter, and there was no accommodation.
No matter how careful the players have been and how many ropes they've tied up.
Exactly. It's like, they will slip if they don't do this. And you're like, oh, come on, you've got to be a bit realistic. But then again, what's the point of having a trap there if they can easily bypass it?
Now, I'm gonna sneak behind the curtain a little bit with this one. I'm not going to say the point. I'm not going to spoil the point. But there's points in Storm King's Thunder where the rulebook said, "This is how you do something." Do I give the example? I will give the example. There's an item inside like a stone tomb, and the rulebook quite clearly states there's only two ways to get in there. You either break it apart, which you have to do like 150 points of damage to it to break it apart, or you lift the lid off it, which requires at least 5 characters to make a DC 20 athletics check.
Jeez, okay.
Which is like, well, if you follow the rules of this book, this is a party of 4.
Yep. You can't
and
do it.
At least 5 people have to do it. So they can't do it. So it was something I read, actually, an idea I read relating to something else completely to do with role-playing games, which was don't come up to a solution to a puzzle.
Yes.
So set a puzzle, which is a bunch of clues, but don't, as a DM, write a solution. Just wait until the characters do something interesting and go, yeah, it worked.
Okay.
So that's what I did with that. I thought I'm going to ignore the actual stipulation of what it says in this book because the players can't do it. If they follow this, they're just going to be annoyed because they've got travelled all this way to get to this place, and then they're going to go, well, what are we supposed to do now? And I just went, I'm just going to see, what do they do? What are they going to come up with? And then if they come up with something stupid, I won't let them.
When?
I'll stop. When you come up with something stupid, if you come up with something which could conceivably work, I'll go, yeah, okay, we'll do that. So just to round up a little bit, because we're running out of time a little bit now.
Yeah.
Tyranny of Dragons, both of you, would you recommend it, or is it best avoided?
I would.
Yeah, I'd recommend it.
I like the idea of the story. The story's good, and the idea behind the story is good, and the culmination of the whole thing in the Well of Dragons actually was really, really cool. And the final fight was epic for everybody involved. So, and the story all the way through was really, really good. It's just the way it was executed and the way it was written really needs to be.
Is it one of those things where, as a DM, then it's well worth playing, but get a paper and pen handy and some post-it notes,
yes,
and tear that thing apart and rebuild it, kind of thing?
I wouldn't recommend it to new DMs.
Yeah, the other thing I'd say that works really well in that, you managed to, Andy, to your credit, weave people's backstories into the kind of events throughout the game. And like doing that sort of thing, that might be a way to bring the different factions in. Like if you had some ties to those factions and you righted a wrong as part of the character's backstory and then you won some favour with them, that may, I don't know, maybe there's a way along those lines that you could show that you were progressing towards something, that you were having this following that you could do something with. There was a couple of points where because 2 of us were followers of Bahamut, avid followers, and some of the other guys were less fond of Bahamut and took the piss out of us all the time, which is good fun. It's always good fun to have something like that in the party, a bit of banter. But there was a couple of times where it felt like we'd converted like a small village of people or a race of people by doing some good deeds there. But there wasn't ever a repercussion from that. Like it wasn't that they then came to fight for us or something at some point later. Maybe there's something you could do along those lines with hindsight.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that I should have improved with hindsight.
That's why you do it, why you learn.
That's true. Yeah, the 2-round TPK, not doing that again. That wasn't fun for anyone.
When it became almost immediately obvious there was no way of making out of the fight, and it was just a question of how many rounds we lasted.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those supposed to die fights, but it wasn't supposed to be quite so quick.
Yeah.
So we were going to talk about some other games, but I think we spent so long talking about Tyranny of Dragons, and we pulled in some of the stuff we were going to talk about. So I think we should go straight to some questions now.
Yes.
I think we'll pull in some of our RPG experience. So actually, we got a question from Budge Wilson, and his question was actually what tempted me to do an RPG kind of special, because he says he's been watching us doing the streaming game, and he quoted on that he's been really enjoying the Champions of Chance game, but has been finding the Masters of Fate game a little more difficult to follow. And part of that is because Adam is not using video, so he said it's a little less interesting to watch. But he says the team, he said there's a different style to it, but he said the one thing that he's really noticed is there was a point, and you'll know which point it was, Andy, when there was almost some PvP, proper PvP combat, so player versus player combat. And he said... His description to me was, you could tell there was real tension in the game at that point, and people were pissed off. And people were pissed off. I actually remember that session quite distinctly.
As do I, yes.
So his question was, what are our thoughts on player versus player combat or issues in a tabletop RPG? And I've got to admit, after that session... I'm not a particular fan of it, although I was kind of enjoying it at the time, because to me it was emergent gameplay. This wasn't something I'd set up. This was something you yourselves were deciding to do.
Yes. Now, I can see why. I mean, the individual... I was involved in the PvP, and one other person...
No, as I say, it was Derek. Your character and Derek's character came to blows over a magical item, basically, and quite literally, we're just about to come to blows.
Yes, and I felt it was in character for both of them at the time.
Yes,
because Arrakis basically wanted it to do something, and Derek's character Imnek didn't want that to happen, basically, and they ended up just squabbling like children and having a bit of a Barney over it.
It was more than just squabbling like children. Like the Champions of Chance squabble like kids all the time, but this was... I was running the stream at the time, and I was finding it uncomfortable just listening. Even though I knew you're both kind of playing to your characters, it's like, this just doesn't feel like a party anymore. This feels like there's about to be two distinct splits here.
The thing is, though, I mean... From the point of view of a bunch of people sitting down to play a game and enjoying themselves, I can understand why it's difficult and it's uncomfortable and you don't want to fall out. The problem is, you are playing characters, and those characters have personalities, and those personalities will sometimes clash.
Yeah.
And they did, admittedly, fairly violently in this case, but I don't think as players you should shy away from that sort of thing.
Depends what you're in the game for, I think.
But I mean, if you're playing a role, those roles are going to have disagreements at times.
As long as you're not being just a complete dick,
Yeah.
I kind of agree with you. It was weird because bizarrely, I was quite enjoying it because I saw this kind of, as I said, this personality with proper role playing. It wasn't part of the game where somebody had made you fight against each other. It was proper role playing a situation emerging that what's happening between the two characters. And as you said, it made sense for both characters to be at arms at this point. It was just there was this weird point where it's like, yeah, but then you got players fighting players, and this could go badly wrong. Someone could, I was getting worried that someone could throw the toys out the pram in real life, and at that point, and
and that's obviously you don't want, because you turn up to play a game and you're supposed to be enjoying it. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a sign though that you are invested in the game, that it's starting to feel like that it's bleeding through from what you're role playing to your general irritation with the other person.
Yeah, the thing is though, it actually went on to be quite character building for both of them. Later in the game.
Yeah.
So they've actually formed, I wouldn't say necessarily an alliance, but certainly an armed truce between
an
the two.
understanding.
Yeah, exactly. An understanding.
Yeah.
That's probably the best way to put it. And I think it's worked to their credit.
Yeah. If this was like another medium, like a TV show or a comic or a film or a book, it would make perfect sense. It would make a more interesting story.
Yeah.
But you're right. In a tabletop role-playing game, it means that someone's feelings may get hurt. So it tread, as a DM, tread carefully, but it's weird as well because we were streaming it as well, which sometimes streaming it can affect. I try not to let the stream affect how we play. So I try and play that. I'm trying to play it. I know we're streaming, but to play the game exactly as I would be playing it if the cameras weren't there. And I think that was one of the few points where I kind of thought, well, if we weren't streaming this, I would have put a pause on this and gone,
is everyone
you're
okay?
all right with this? Yeah. And maybe I should have done that. Maybe I should have done that midstream and said, look, pause. Is everyone happy with this? And that may be something I need to consider if something else like comes up again. So Fisterclam, it's our name, asks, where do you think the rules sweet spot is? He says, my players always ask me to throw out gathering spell components, faffing around with lodgings, and so I never bother anymore.
I think it depends what skills your characters have invested in. Like, if one of them has a skill where they want to play their music to ensure that there are lodgings for free, and that becomes like a little point, or, they've got skills where they can go and forage for food and you can bring that into the game, I think that's fine. I think if you insist on doing it every single time you stop and you have to go through this rigmarole of, and then you sleep, and then you go and get breakfast, and then you go and, like, if it becomes that rigid, that probably would grate on me as a player.
This is actually the question I've been thinking about the most. Now, as we've already mentioned, we play on Roll20, we tend to play on a weekday evening, and because of the availability of people getting home from work, and me and a couple of other people having to finish at a particular time so that we can get enough sleep after we've had the whole wind down, because let me assure you, sleeping after playing D&D is always hard work. You're buzzing after a game.
Yep.
It means that we get about a 2.5 hour session.
Yeah.
This means that I cannot stand anything which wastes time. And this is I realise I have a problem with this.
I don't think that's a problem, Steve. I agree.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
But for this reason, like, for instance, as you said, gathering spell components, no, I'm not too bothered. Encumbrance, I'll hand wave encumbrance. Yeah. Now, bizarrely, we're playing on Roll20, so I could actually set up Roll20 to cover encumbrance perfectly. But hand wave, buying your breakfast every morning, paying for lodgings, hand wave that a little bit as well. We've got that much gold, it doesn't matter anyway, so you'd all be able to pay for it, so it doesn't matter. Similarly, I cannot stand shopping. I cannot stand shopping in a game. This is my DM's pet hate. When everyone goes, right, I'd like to go buy. Right, okay.
Yeah, you can have it.
It's 15. Yeah, it's like, whatever. Well, how much is it? Well, how much is it in the player's handbook? Well, it's 25 gold. Well, it's 25 gold then. Well, can I convince the shopkeeper to give me a bargain?
No.
No, just that's the price. Just pay for it, and let's move on with the actual bloody story.
Yeah.
But again, that kind of comes down to if you. One of the things that your character is good at is persuading people. It always feels like a real cop-out when you still get stuck with the same prices. There's no, you've paid a penalty for not having some other ability so that you're more persuasive.
But my argument against that, though, is your character is good at persuading people, like persuading the big bad not to blow up the world, or persuading the guards to let you in. It's not persuading the shopkeeper to give you a fight. You're not like, what is his name? Don, what's his face off daytime television? What's your best price on this thing?
David Dickinson.
Not David Dickinson, the short cockney, what's his name? Oh, he's always on the consumer programmes on BBC.
I don't know,
but I take your point.
And I think, you watch like a TV programme or a film, you don't see someone like haggling over,
a
bag of crisps. Big deal. Okay, if it's like a big deal, okay, like we're smuggling goods or buying some weapons, or
trying to sell a great big piece of adamantine.
Yeah, fair enough. But if you're just going down the shops to buy some new iron rations and a torch for your next adventure, it's just like, no, just do that out of session. Just say, we're in town, I've spent this, let's get on to the exciting stuff.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
So, there's a few rules I just like hand wave past. Let's get to the excitement. Let's get to the fight. Let's get to the conversation with the big bad. Let's get to the fun, basically.
Yeah.
Fister Clam asks, what's your favourite campaign you've played in?
Well, I've only played 3. So I've played a bit of the Mines of Fandalar, which I enjoyed the bit we played. Cuthbert the Knob never got to saw whether he rose back to riches. We played the Tyranny of Dragons, and Falco successfully defeated the guy that killed his long-lost love. and stopped Tiamat rising, so that was pretty satisfying. And then Zanhorn the Bard is still slogging through Storm King's Thunder, trying to become the most famous bard in all the lands. I think of the characters, I never really got that attached to Cuthbert. Falco I quite enjoyed, but he was quite a serious character. Zanhorn is without doubt the most fun to play because he's just ridiculous in all sorts of ways.
So what about campaign though? Because we've actually got another question on favourite characters. So what about campaign? So so these 3 D&D campaigns, John, are they the only kind of RPG campaigns you've ever played?
I played Werewolf, I think it was, years and years ago, which is a different system altogether. But that was quite good fun. But it was fun, but we were inexperienced in doing RPGs and didn't read situations and which characters were supposed to be helping us or not, as the case may be. So at one point, we had the werewolf that was supposed to become our ally. We decided we didn't trust them at all at this point, and we had him set in concrete in a bath with dynamite hung from a crane. And when he started crying, because he didn't know anything to tell us, we decided that it was he was basically taking the piss, so we killed him. At which point, I think the DM was probably like just head in hands, like, "What do I do now?" They've killed the main plot lead.
I've got to admit, you explained that right. Anyone has never played a role-playing game, when they hear you talk about what you've done in a role-playing game, think you're a mad person.
Yep. Yes.
Think you are absolutely nuts.
Yeah,
and they're right.
So my favourite, is Storm Kings. Just to finish that off.
I think at the moment is the current. I mean, I've played quite a few when I was younger, but they were so far long ago that I can't really remember much about them. I played Paranoia. I think we've got a question on later on, actually. And I think I played Cyberpunk as well. I quite enjoyed Cyberpunk. I can't remember the name of the campaign. It was a long time ago.
Cyberpunk's about to be reissued.
I know!
In fact,
I've seen it!
The start set's available on RPG now.
I might end up getting that. I quite enjoyed Cyberpunk. But I think at the moment, playing in your campaign at the moment, I think is by far and away, it's definitely the best I've played in recently. I really enjoyed Mines of Fandalar, actually, though, which our friend Chris did. That was a really nice, tight little campaign, actually. It's
really good little campaign. That's the one that's in the starter set.
Yeah.
It's really nice. Have you looked at the Essentials set?
No, not yet.
So they've basically remade the starter set called the Essentials set. So I picked it up because it was dirt cheap on Amazon. I mean, stupidly cheap. So I gave it just so I've got it there in case. And I don't know how, but they've managed to cram more in the box than they did on the starter set.
Ooh, okay. Interesting.
I mean, there's proper poster maps. There is cards for everything. So you've got cards for spells and items that you can give to players with a little tuck box that keeps them all in as well. But the adventure, they're only like, if you imagine a double page of the book, it's like a quarter of that double page is taken up by a map and the rest of it is description.
Right.
But because of that, they've managed to cram about 10 dungeons into this starter set book.
Oh, bloody hell.
That's
Each one, I reckon, with a little bit of flair from the DM, could take a session per one. There's just so much content crammed into that box. It's ridiculous. Favourite campaigns I have run, because I've only ever played in one campaign proper as in a campaign, except for your start of Tyranny of Dragons, which was a vampire game, to kind of put into context of your werewolf game, John. But I'll explain that later. I think my favourite one I ran was actually one I ran in uni, which was the Underdark campaign. What was it called? Night Below, which we never actually finished because it gets long. I really enjoyed running that. I think I'd love to rerun that again in 5e. But I would say I'm really enjoying running Storm King's Thunder at the moment. I think by the time I finish Storm King's Thunder, that's going to have won.
Okay.
I've really properly got into running the Forgotten Realms world and campaign, which bizarrely is actually new to me because I used to play in Mystara, which is a setting which is more or less dead now. But yeah, because I had the basic D&D rules, and the basic D&D rules came with the Mystara setting, and Mystara seems to have just been forgotten about.
Actually, can I change my answer?
Go on.
Baldur's Gate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cheating.
Playing the computer game is not the same thing.
No, I know.
So, on a similar question, Caleb O'Brien asks, favourite character you've played and or favourite moment or encounter?
It's got to be Arrakis. Got to be Arrakis.
Yeah, he's quite a character.
He is. I love him. He's brilliant. I played him twice, actually, now. I played him in Mines of Fandalar as well, but I didn't get the opportunity to express him fully because the people I was playing with were very new to D&D, and I kind of ended up sort of leading them through the game on a bit of a choke chain, which is a bit of a shame.
I kind of get the impression a lot of people do that. They have one character and then they just kind of regurgitate them in one way or another in a different campaign. Like if you look at like the streamers, a lot of them have this one character and that one character keeps coming up and there's no sensibility about the level progression. You know, the level they are is dependent on the game they're playing, but it's that character that you all know and love kind of thing that they're most comfortable in.
I think sometimes you just find a niche or a particular, set of stuff that works well together and is fun to play.
Yeah.
But then equally, I find it more interesting to play something different each time.
Yeah. So my favourite, I said I only really played in one, which I played a vampire bike mechanic, which was an interesting character. But my favourite NPC I've played has got to be Pappy Gutterunch from Andy's campaign, which is the ogre demon worshipper. I just love playing him. I've got to find another reason to bring him back.
Yeah, that was fun to listen to.
Is he the one that Arrakis kept convincing that he was these gods?
He was his god. That's the one. Yeah,
that's the one.
That was a good encounter, actually. The both times that Arrakis has basically just shown up in all of his glory and convinced Pappy Gutterunch that he's the god and she needs to basically wander off and kill a giant or a dragon. That's just brilliant.
I think some favourite moments for some of the campaigns we've been in recently. I've quite enjoyed playing a bard. And it's kind of cringy, but it's been quite good fun making up ridiculous songs about the other characters and singing them and seeing how they react to them. So that's been quite interesting. I've got a crap singing voice, but it's good fun. Both the characters I played recently have had the blink spell, and one of them used it in fairly serious and dire circumstances to escape dragons and all sorts quite effectively, and the other one, Zanhorn, just frequently fails to blink out of the plane at the most inconvenient moments, like charging up to a fire giant or something to try and blast him, screwing up his roll, and then that's the last you'll see of me. Oh shit, I haven't disappeared. At which point the giant just looks down, just goes, knocks him unconscious in a single hit. Just little things like that, where it's all lined up to go perfectly, and then everything goes massively sideways.
My favourite moment that sticks in my head, actually, is from that vampire game. So we played, we had preset characters, so we didn't make them. So the guys made up this biker gang, basically, and we all just took one. And vampire had a system of your personality was nature and demeanour. So your nature was supposed to be how you roleplay your characters, how everyone sees them. But your demeanour was more mechanical in that you could gain willpower back by doing things in your demeanour. But you were supposed to do them a little bit more subtly because it was supposed to be what you're actually like, not what everyone thinks you're like. Well, my character's demeanour was a curmudgeon. So you can be a curmudgeon openly. Yeah. It's really easy. But the rules were, as I said, you had to try and keep it slightly hidden. But we came to this point in the game where we're up against the clan of werewolves and everyone else is shitting themselves because it's werewolves can tear the shit out of tear up a vampire in no time, even though vampires are hard, werewolves are much harder. But everyone was convinced, no, we've got to go see the werewolves, we've got to do them. And I said, I banged on the table and I said, if we go see those werewolves, we are going to get our asses kicked. And I made a big point about this, and everyone went, no, it'll be fine. Well, the curmudgeon ability was if you say something bad is going to happen, and it happens, you get your willpower back.
Nice.
So we're doing this, the shit hits the fan, and I say to the GM, the keeper, is it keeper or GM in World of Darkness? I can't remember. I say, can I have a willpower point, please? He says, why? I was point the rulebook at him and go, because of that. And he's like, oh my god, this is the best thing ever. Yes, you can have one. And then later on, it's we got knocked off the motorbike and the petrol tank got fired. And I went, that's going to explode now, isn't it? And he went, Roll the dice. Yes. Have another willpower.
Brilliant.
That's brilliant.
I have to admit, I am quite enjoying playing as Captain Cocktail in the Star Trek RPG.
That does sound like a fun one.
His name's actually Axis Panathai, but he's constantly drunk at the helm, so... He's basically got a miniature replicator that only produces gin and tonic next to his captain's chair. But the chief engineer got fed up and basically hacked it so it would only produce mocktails.
Brilliant.
Okay, that sounds like a cool character.
It was fun. It was really, really good.
Right, so Alberto Coccadrillo has sent us a few questions. What was the worst critical fail or the one that made you laugh the most?
There was one in the recent session where two of our characters teleported on top of a roof, then discovered that the roof wasn't as, what should we say, suitable for perching on as we might have originally thought.
Is it not a load-bearing structure?
Well, it was just steep tiles without anything else to hold on to, and there wasn't any, crenellations or anything that you could brace yourself against. So the two characters are now slowly sliding down this roof.
Pop.
Maybe I could throw a rope onto the top, so make a lassie, try and throw it on the top, and basically end up screwing it up so badly I just throw the rope off the side of the building. At which point we're like, right, okay, fine, let's just ditch our only way of getting back out of here and teleport inside the room before we both fall to our deaths.
Awesome.
We'll deal with the consequences later.
And I also made them make an intelligence check to see if he could remember where the bed was, and he failed, so he teleported 6 feet above the ground and whacked into the ground as well.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many of those moments in our campaign that it's difficult to pick one.
Oh, God, we've had a few in ours. I remember when Derek's character, Imnek, failed an intelligence check and turned to stone. So he was basically a statue for 2 sessions. Much to Arrakis' delight, because he just poked him every now and again. But later on,
I think he had a simulacrum at the time, wasn't he?
He did, yeah.
So he wasn't out of the game completely, but
no, he did take part. But yeah, Harvey managed to sort of save him. But later on, he got his he failed an intelligence check against a mind flayer.
Intellect Devourer,
that's right. And basically, it just got turned to a gibbering vegetable. Just stand there. That was quite funny. Although not obviously for Arrakis, but Arrakis' first fail, I think, was actually near the start of the adventure, where I'd never lived this day.
Yes, I was going to mention that.
Just amazing. Basically, we were sort of chasing somebody out of a window, and Arrakis is not a rogue. He's not dexterous at all. He's a sorcerer.
To put it into context, what happened was the guy was going to go out the window, so Sid threw ball bearings down to try and slip him and slow him down. So the guy you're trying to be chasing jumps out the window and passes the dex check. So basically just completely ignores the ball bearings and carries on going. By which point, the guy's carrying going and no one can chase after him. So Arrakis goes, well, I'll chase after him then. Fails the dex check.
And ends up basically on his back in the middle of a muddy alley, having just bought a brand new suit, just covered in mud. So he's just sat there fuming as this guy just runs away. Oh, and of course the party have never, ever let him live it down.
Rightly so. Arrakis is one of those characters that's quite easy to hate.
But he is also very, very useful.
Oh, yeah.
I have to admit, the very last session we played actually was, I think, one of the times where the party gelled the best, just bantering off each other in a situation we created. We basically went upstairs into a house that we knew was being burgled, and essentially Sid sort of snuck in and shot one guy in the back of the leg. His other 2 mates didn't know what the hell was going on. The muscle wandered into the room, Derek Imnek, and just stood there menacingly. The two guys ransacking this room just froze and, oh shit. What can what do you want for us not to do anything? And Arrakis just saunters in casually, stands by the door and says, 2,000 gold pieces. It was just an absolutely fantastic bit of timing from the entire party, and it was not pre-planned in the slightest. It was ace.
So Alberto also asks, have you played Paranoia? He says he always wanted to, but something that sounds chaotic and fun in equal measures. No, none of us have played this.
Very long time ago. I was at school.
Oh, you have?
Oh, God, yeah. It was about 25 years ago. I can't remember pretty much anything about it other than I quite enjoyed it, but it was weird. But that's all I can remember. It was so long ago, and it was for such a short amount of time that I can't comment.
This isn't the one with the Jenga blocks, is it?
No, that's Dread, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
No, so I don't know. Sorry, Alberto, we can't comment on that one, really. What are the most creative systems you have played or are aware of? However, he mentions Barrio Zeno, which uses only 2 coins to resolve an action.
Interesting.
Well, we recently played Blades in the Dark. I'd say that's quite an interesting and different take. And the other one that's quite different in terms of RPG style I found was the Faith RPG, which we played a little bit of, Steve.
Yes, which I'd like to get to play a bit more of, actually. So, yeah, I'd say Faith is a similar... It's pretty standard kind of RPG in the way it runs, but the way in which you resolve is basically with a deck of cards. It's a standard deck of cards, but you can buy like special artistic ones. So the skill determines how many cards you can draw, and you pick out the best card in that what you draw, which has a little bit of deterministic about it. And it's basically you can either have one deck of cards that everyone draws from, or it suggests you can have a deck of cards each. So you can get if you've got a little bit of a blackjack mindset, you can try and keep in mind of like, well, I've drawn all the bloody kings here. I'm destined for a failure on the next few checks or whatever. So yeah, that was a really interesting one, and the way you could push and pull with that system was really cool. I also thought the combat was really cool in Faith, just because it just flowed. There was no initiatives. There was no what you're going to do on your turn. It just flowed and things carried on. And even said things like, if you meet a group of like 10 bad guys, don't work out what all the 10 bad guys are going to do. Just do the 3 guys that are shooting at you and let the rest sort it out, kind of thing that's happening around you. So yeah, I'd like to get back to that. There was a couple of little niggles with those rules with regard to healing, but I think I'd like to get back to how that resolution. Ironically, that's going to be one that's going to be harder to play in Roll20, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right, because of the cards thing.
It was definitely a physical game, and it also gave you equipment cards as well, which was a definite case of you could see exactly what you had in front of you. Blades in the Dark, very quickly, is so different to D&D, it's unbelievable.
It's bonkers.
So
it's mental. Oh God, it's almost like a permanent retcon. It's weird.
Yeah,
I found it difficult to get my head around a little bit. So it's a game in which you're playing like dastardly and cunning thieves and cutthroats and what have you. And this bog standard game is you're doing some kind of score. It's in like this dark city that's similar to like the one in like Thief or Gentleman Bastards books or something like that. But you can do, as you said, retcons. You can go back in time in the game and basically say, we set up this thing earlier, which is really cool, I thought.
Yeah, I liked that.
It's almost like... you remember watching something like Ocean's 11 where they're kind of narrating the story as they go along, and you can see the actions of the narrator. Dave will do this, and then 4 seconds later, Steve will do that. And, if this goes wrong, you've only got 2 seconds to actually grab the card and get out the door. And if that goes wrong, then you've got Bob watching over you, will snipe them out. And all of this happens as it's being narrated. That, I think, is probably the closest analogy I can think of for Blades in the Dark, but of course it requires players to really think on their feet.
It requires the DM to really think on his feet as well.
It's definitely harder work. Like actually playing the game, it requires you to be thinking about this stuff all the time.
I have to admit, I do quite like the Star Trek RPG system of the 2D20s. It's quite straightforward. It's funny, it's simpler than D&D actually. Is that you roll 2d20s, it's basically reversed, so 1s are good and 20s are bad. But there's no such thing as a critical success or a critical failure. It's, generally speaking, down to the discretion of the DM as to how badly or well you do, depending on what your role is. So, generally speaking, you'll roll, say, a fail, but it will be... He might let you pass, but he'll give you what's called a complication. So, for example, you'll get through a tricky door with this test, but you'll make so much noise that you'll alert the guards anyway, for example, something like that. But you can almost push your luck as well. So you've got something called momentum. You can only build up a certain amount of it, but you can choose to spend it. So if you do really well in some tests, you'll gain some. And then later on in a I'd say, more difficult test, you can spend some of it to get extra dice to give you more chance to roll. Yeah. So it's quite flexible, and I quite like it. But again, you can also tell the DM, yes, I would like to push my luck a bit further, and you'll give the DM a complication in order for you to get a die. So that essentially it's almost like karma. You'll do well early on, but you're in trouble later.
There's quite a few games run on that 2D20 system. That's Modiphius's kind of in-house system. So they've set quite a few of their games. I know the Infinity RPG runs on it, and John Carter of Mars does. So I think that they've definitely, that's the one you're going to see a bit more of as well.
I quite like it.
I've not tried it in anger, but the Genesis / FFG Star Wars system, which your skills are coloured dice.
Oh, okay.
So you might have 2 green, so you roll 2 green dice, or 2 green and a yellow, so that's what you roll. And then the GM tells you to roll additional dice for the complications.
Okay.
And it's a bit like reading tea leaves, unfortunately. But what you have is you have symbols, and certain symbols will cancel out other symbols. So positives and negatives. But you have like how successful you were and how many complications there were. So you can be ultra successful, but have racked up huge amounts of complications in the process. But the other cool thing about that is the Star Wars system is you can use the Fate die, which is an extra die you can add to any pool you want. But there's a token that sits in the middle of the table which has light side and dark side on it. So if it's on the light side, then the players can use it to roll on their dice. And it's a positive dice. But as soon as they use it, they flip the token over.
Ooh.
And then the GM's allowed to use that dice as a negative dice.
Interesting.
But when he does that, he flips the token back again.
Nice.
There is balance in the Force.
Exactly, yeah.
That's really cool.
So,
quite like that.
Yeah. So, the last question is, what RPG game or system would you love to play but haven't had the chance to yet? And what would you be willing to do in order to play it?
Dragons Conquer America. Back it and wait for it to arrive. I'm still waiting for it to arrive. But soon.
I don't know, really. Possibly Root, but we've already talked about that. But what would I be willing to do? I don't know. Invent some kind of time equivalent of a TARDIS so that I can get more time to do things, because I don't have the time. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's definitely the big problem.
All sorts. I mean, I keep thinking about which D&D campaigns I want to run, and there's about 5 campaigns I want to run at the moment. There's about 6 new systems I want to try. I'd like to play... We played Blades in the Dark once. I'd like to play quite literally a lot more of that, because I feel as if we were just poking at it a bit and we could go much further with that.
Definitely. It felt like we kind of got our heads around like the basics, and now like with 3 or 4 more sessions you could master it, kind of thing. Yeah.
I'd also, I mean, I just want to try loads of new systems. I mean, I catalogued, because of like Humble Bundle, I catalogued how many RPG systems I own, and things like buying them secondhand off bloody Facebook groups. That's terrible. I think I've got like 20 different systems we could play right now.
That's bonkers.
And that's systems. That's not campaigns. That's systems.
Oh, God.
I think I've got enough Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition stuff to play that now until I die.
Yeah, so have I. I've got a chest full downstairs.
And that's without them releasing any new stuff.
Speaking of which, I've noticed I found another one on Amazon. There's a new D&D 5th edition book out.
Is it the Rick and Morty one?
It is not. It's Eberron.
See, I've decided that I need to cut my losses and say I'm not going to get some things, and I've decided I'm not going to get the Eberron book.
I think I might do the same.
Mainly because the Oberon campaign setting doesn't actually intrigue me at all.
I must admit I'm the same. I think that might be the first one I don't get.
Because I bought the Ravnica book, and I bought it just because one player in our group wanted to play one of the character class subclasses in it. And there's lots of interesting stuff in it. There's loads of monsters I can use, but I can't see me ever running a Ravnica campaign because I really don't know actually much about Ravnica. And I think I'm well entrenched in the Sword Coast now.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would definitely like to play some more 5e. So if you guys want to run another session, that's great. But I also feel like you've both DM'd for me, and it would be cool if I could DM for both of you two, possibly in the same game.
Quite like that.
Yes, I would quite like that as well.
And the question is, what campaign would we run?
Tomb of Annihilation.
Well, I've listened to a chunk of that, I think, on Dice Camera Action. So I may already be familiar with some of the background, which might be useful.
It's not a bad call, actually.
Or Waterdeep.
I've also got
The heist, Dragon Heist.
I think Heist. I've had a flick through Heist, and I think Heist is going to be difficult to run.
Really?
To get, yeah, because I've read a few things about Dragon Heist that because there's so many different options in it on how to play, it feels a bit watered down.
Okay.
So I've heard a few people say that apparently there are things online where someone has basically fixed Dragon Heist, where you do all the dungeons, so you get to see all the villains. Mm-hmm. So you basically get your money's worth out the book, and B, actually do a heist.
Oh.
Right.
So, Team of Annihilation might be interesting. I had an idea for how to link that to our current campaign as well.
Really?
Intriguing.
Okay.
I did, yeah.
Which
might be worth sharing with you at some point. Anyway, I think we've waffled on for far too long.
Yeah.
As usual.
So it's time to draw. As per usual. I've now got to cut half an hour at least out of this podcast. So it is time to say goodbye. So thank you very much for listening. We have been Polyhedron Collider. If you actually enjoyed listening to us, please give us a review on iTunes or your podcast platform of choice. You can chat to us on Twitter. We are collectively at PolyhedronC, but that is basically that's me, which is actually the Twitter handle I check the most, but I'm also available at Wahoffle
Of course you are. I'm available at Sonic H with a 0.
I'm at John_Cage, and Rory, when he's with us, is at Rory J. Summers.
We are also on Facebook, and also the Board Game Geek Guild 2726, which we do publish reviews and other articles there as well.
And appropriately enough for tonight, if you fancy a bit of D&D, just D&D at the moment, but who knows, we might stream some other RPGs. Every Thursday at about 7:30, Steve's nodding his head. You can find us on twitch.tv/Polyhedron Collider, and I'm close to the end of the backlog of getting ready to upload all the missing videos to youtube.com/user/Polyhedron Collider.
So actually, on a related note, I did want to mention this. I'd like us to cover more RPG stuff, but I realise that a lot of people listen to the podcast because it's a board game podcast. Mm-hmm. So I'd be interested to hear listeners' thoughts on what they'd like, how they would like us to cover RPGs. Is it things like streaming? Like, I know the problem with streaming is at the moment we're in massive D&D campaigns which take bloody ages. Would it be more interesting for us to do one-shots, things that just, are shorter, like mini campaigns? Would it be more interesting for us to do streaming of other games like Blades in the Dark or, Forbidden Lands? Or would you like us to just mix all the RPG chat into the normal podcast as it is, or do a separate podcast kind of episode like we've done now? Love to hear your thoughts, basically. In the meantime, don't forget about polyhedroncollider.com. We have been a little bit slack lately of keeping that updated, but we've got some Kickstarter highlights up, and if I can actually get my arse in gear, I might get some reviews out on that in the next few weeks. But until next time, see you later and happy gaming.
Bye.
Catch you later.